So today we have verses 32, 33, 34, and 35 lined up. I'll start with verse number 32. Sarganam adi antasya madhyam chevaham arjuna adhyatma vidya vidyanam vada pravadatamaham. So Lord Krishna says, of all creations, I am the beginning and the end and also the middle. O Arjuna, of knowledges, I am the knowledge of the self. Of arguments, vad. That's a kind of logic that we have. So this is what the verse translates to. Let's take this up word by word. Sarganam. So amongst all the creatures. Not creatures, creations actually. And I will link it up with one of the previous verses that we had done in this chapter. So Sarganam means of all creations. Adi is the beginning. Ant is end. Cha and Madhyam, the middle. Cha and Ev also. Aham, I. Arjun is O Arjun. Adhyatma, Vidya, or knowledge of the self. Vidyanam, amongst the knowledges. Vad is it's a name actually of a kind of logic, and we will discuss this. Pravadatam, of arguments. Aham, I. So the verse translates to, I repeat, of all creations, I am the beginning and the middle, of all creations, I am the beginning and the end and also the middle. O Arjuna, of knowledges, I am the knowledge of the self. Of arguments, vad, which translates to roughly English, logic in English. So let's chant it together. Sarganamadi antasya madhyam chevaham arjuna adhyatma vidya vidyanam vada pravadatamaham. So again, we're just continuing with his manifestations, so that Krishna is telling us about the best amongst the whatever category we are picking up. So the first line is translating to, I am the beginning, Adi, middle, Madhyam, and end, Ant, of all creations. Now see, in the 20th verse of this chapter, the verse read as, I am the beginning, the middle, and also the end of all beings. There it was Bhutanam. The rest of it was the same. Beginning, end, and middle was there. But there we were talking about the beings, and in this verse we are talking about the creations. And actually that the 20th verse of this chapter was when Krishna had started with his salient manifestations on Arjuna's request. You may recollect, right? Now, this verse is using Sarganam, or all creations, instead of Bhutanam, or beings. Now, the entire creation, Sargaha, that means both the living and the non-living, or animate or inanimate, rests in Brahman. And now I will link it to the 4th and 5th verse of chapter 7, the Jnana Vigyan Yoga, where we had talked about the higher nature and the lower nature of Brahman. So we had covered, we had talked about the subtle matter, which consists of the intelligence or buddhi, mind or man, and ego or ahankar. And then we had talked about the gross matter, which consisted of the, which, is derived from the Panch Mahabhut, that's the 5 great elements, Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal and Prithvi. And the last, which was the higher nature of Brahman, was the Jeevbhut or spirit, or that enlivening force, which when functioning through the subtle and the gross matter, results in the brilliant expression of life. So there we were talking about beings, and in this verse now, the first metaphor that comes our way is about the entire creation. So the world's pluralistic phenomena arise from Brahman, exist in Brahman, and merge into Brahman. Just as a wave arises from the ocean, exists in the ocean, and falls back into the ocean. So, when you are examining the wave at any point of time, actually it's all ocean ultimately. It's just an expression. So what Krishna is saying, that all creations arise from Brahman, express themselves in Brahman, and dissolve back into Brahman. Or Brahman is the beginning, the middle, and the end of all creations. And therefore, Krishna is now identifying, declares his vibhuti with this beginning, middle, and end of all creations. So that was the first line and the first metaphor. Now we come to the second line. So the first half, Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam. I am the knowledge of the self amongst the knowledges. So now Krishna comes to the knowledge, and how amongst all the knowledges, which is the best kind of knowledge. Now see, we see in we read about scientific discoveries every day, and the modern world has made great advancements in all sciences. So, earlier, you could only talk over a telephonic, a physical, a wired system of communication. Today, you're on mobiles. And then, gradually things are evolving and things are becoming easier for us. The fact that I'm able to communicate with you is again an advancement or progress of science and technology. So science always progresses. Now, previous scientific conclusions very often are negated or replaced by new scientific research, right? So the scientific knowledge, which is related to the world, it's in the relative realm. It exists only in this world. I mean, the law of gravity that we know functions only on this earth. The moment you go to moon, it'll change, right? So this knowledge is transient. It's fleeting. It's not permanent. And also when you look around you and you read the newspapers and you listen to the news, you see that it is not providing us with peace or rest, neither to the individuals nor to countries or nations. It is only through the knowledge of the self, or what subjective knowledge of ourselves, that we can achieve peace and attain liberation. So peace of mind and liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Further, this knowledge of the self, or Adhyatma Vidya, once we know this, we also understand how we function, so how we perceive or act at the physical level, how we emote at the level of the mind, and how we are able to think, comprehend, discriminate at the intellectual level. And it is this functioning of our various faculties, at the body level, at the mental level, and at the intellectual level, which results in this conditional knowledge, what you call the scientific knowledge. So it is this conditioned knowledge which is derived by enablement of our body, mind, and intellect, that the scientific knowledge is manifested. I mean, so Einstein is able to propound a theory of relativity because his mind, body, and intellect are functioning through that Adhyatma, Vidya, or through that Brahman, right? So anyone, for that matter, whatever we are propounding is through that knowledge of the self. So it is the pure consciousness that forms the foundation, basis, substratum of all knowledges. So the knowledge of the self is beyond the relative realm, and therefore it is permanent, it is always there. And it is also the only knowledge and the only thing actually which we take with us. When we die, this is the only thing that we take with us, the knowledge of the self. Whatever to whatever level we are evolved, that is what will go with us to the next birth. The rest of it will all die out with our death. So Krishna identifies himself with this supreme knowledge amongst all knowledges. Then we come to Vad, of arguments. Now here I'll take some time, and I thought I will explain to you how great our logic system was in ancient tradition. Now see, in the Indian tradition, Shastrarth, I don't know whether some of you are familiar with the word, I'm sure you would be. Actually, Shastrarth was a intellectual debate. Shastra is your scriptures. Shastrarth means debate on the scriptures. So this was prevalent to establish and to counter-establish whatever, a thesis or a counter-thesis. So this was very prevalent. These debates were conducted to examine various religious, philosophical, and moral issues. And the Nyaya Sutras, or the treatise on logic that we have in our repository of scriptures, mention 3 debates or arguments. So the first one is Vad, the second one is Jalpa, and the third is Vitanda. So these are the 3 logic types of debates or arguments that we have. And you'll find that this is what we are broadly using in, amongst all the scientific, legal, even let's say the news that you see on the TV, where there's this argument going on, a debate on TV. These are the 3 things, kinds of logic that are arguments that are being used. So the 3 debates, I'll repeat, are Vad, Jalpa, and Vitand. Now, broadly, the goal of the first establishment of truth on an accepted doctrine. And so that is Vad. So Vad is the goal of this argument is establishment of truth on an accepted doctrine. Jalpa and Vitanda are arguments for the sake of victory. And now let's take this up. I will take it up in further detail so that you appreciate the detailing that our ancestors have done for us. So Vad is also called the honest debate. This is the reasoning or the argument that is free from malice and hatred, undertaken with the noble object of understanding the truth. And it has certain characteristics which are specified, laid out in our scriptures, which is the establishment of the thesis or refutation, that is a counter thesis. This should be based upon adequate evidence or means of knowledge. That means praman. Praman is evidence that should be available, as well as upon proper reasoning, whether it's hypothetical or indirect, but the reasoning has to be correct. It has to be logical. So this is tark, what it's called. Also, the conclusion should not contradict any of the accepted doctrines that you are using to forward the argument or counter argument. So any siddhant that you are using should not be contradicted while you're presenting your reasoning. And you should follow, there were certain laid out steps. So 5 steps were laid out to demonstrate the argument explicitly. And it is, one should be clear that the thesis is to be defended and the counter thesis is to be refuted. So these were the characteristics or the pointers that one had to follow while doing this argument. So it was just not, an arbitrary discussion, what you see largely on the TV these days. So this was Vad, the honest debate. Jalpa was the bad debate with the sole purpose of claiming victory. So arguments advanced on the object of establishing one's own creed and condemning others. And the debater could use for the establishment his own position or the refutation of, the opponent's thesis, and legitimate rejoinders, any kind of clinchers. This was allowed. So this was Jalpa. Vitand is the squabbling debate, where you are literally fighting. So the argument firstly was for the purpose of abusing and condemning others' creeds, and a debate where there's no counter thesis established. So when you're countering, you say, I don't agree with this. You are not specifying the counter thesis. You're not agreeing with the thesis, that's fine. But what are you suggesting? What is the counter thesis? There was no counter thesis. And the debater tries to ensure victory simply by refuting the thesis put forward. And it is a debate in which the goal is victory, as in the Jalpa. So these are actually two bad debates, and Vitand is the squabbling debate where you're literally fighting. This is what you actually normally see on the TV these days. So amongst the debates, arguments, Krishna is identifying himself with the honest debate or the Vad debate, which has set principles which are followed, and it is for the establishment of truth where there is no malice, and you are neutral towards everything. There's no malice and hatred. So this is what the Vitand thing, this is what the Vad argument was with which Krishna is identifying. So this was verse number 32. Moving on to verse number 33. Aksharanamakaru asmi dvandva samasikasya cha ahamevakshayah kalo dhataham vishvato mukha. So Krishna continues and says that of letters, I am the akar or a, or English a, and dvandva of all compounds. We will discuss this, dvandva. I am verily the everlasting time. I am the supporter facing all directions. So this is what the verse reads as. Now let's take it up word by word. Aksharanam. Akshar is letter. Aksharanam becomes amongst the letters or of the letters. Akar, the starting alphabet. A, akar. Asmi, am. Dvand, dual. Samasikasya, of the compounds. We'll discuss this. Cha, and aham, I, a, verily. Akshaya is everlasting, which does not perish, imperishable. Everlasting. Kal is time. Dhata is supporter. Aham, I. Vishvato mukha is facing all directions, right? So of letters, I am akar, and dvandva of all compounds. I am verily the everlasting time. I am the supporter facing all directions. Let's chant it together. Aksharanamakaru asmi dvandva samasikasya cha ahamevakshaya kalu Bhrataham Vishwamukha. So now the first set is, the first line is actually, we are talking about the topic of letters and words. See, when we started with the salient features, I told you it will be presented to us very analytically, so amongst the purifiers, amongst the seasons, okay, we'll continue and discuss that, amongst the cows, amongst the elephants, among the horses. In each category, amongst the knowledges, amongst Vedas, Krishna is identifying the best in that particular category. Now, we come to the topic of letters and words. So, A or Akar is the first letter of the Sanskrit alphabet, just as A, which is very similar to this sound to that of the Akar, is the first letter of the English alphabet. Now, in Sanskrit, and we all know, and we have read enough to know that Sanskrit is a very, very scientific language. In Sanskrit, no letter can be pronounced without the support of a. So even when you say ka, a consonant, okay, it is ka plus a. So the sound becomes ka. So this is a akar. So ma, pa. At the end, you are ending it with the sound of an a. So the letter a is the most important in the Sanskrit alphabet. And it is therefore considered foremost amongst all letters and sounds. Dvandva of all compounds. Now, when we are talking of compounds, we are not talking about compound element, compounds as in chemistry, but we are talking about compound words. So in Sanskrit, samas means compound words, that is words which are formed by combination of two words. Okay. And there are 4 categories under which the samas takes place, or when you join the 2 words or you unite the 2 words, right? So I'll just briefly tell you that one is the avayayi bhav, where, so you are joining 2 words, right? So now the emphasis in avayayi bhav is on the first word and not on the second word. So an example I'll give you is the proper noun Adi Hari. Adi is beginning and Hari is the name of Lord. But here the emphasis is on Adi Hari. That means you are within something, or you're the beginning of something, right? So the emphasis is on Adi. So that was the first kind of samas or rule by which you unite. Then Tat Purush, which in this case, in this union of 2 words, the emphasis is on the second word. And that is what the is implied. So for example, Sitapati. Sita is name of Queen Sita and Pati is husband. So Sita's husband, which is Ram. So the word is implying Ram. So the emphasis on the second word, which is the Pati of Sita. Then Bahuvrihi, this means this was the third classification where, you are not emphasizing either the first or the second, but the 2 are combining to imply something else. Okay. A very good example of this, Pitambar. Now, Peet we know is yellow. Amber is garment. So Pitambar becomes yellow garment, which actually refers to Lord Krishna. So it's neither referring to yellow nor, okay, in a sense it is, but that's not the import. It's, the union is implying Lord Krishna who wears yellow clothes, yellow garments. So that was the third. Fourth is Dvandva, with which Krishna is identifying in this verse, which is an equal emphasis on both the words which are being united. So, for example, Radha Krishna. Both are equally important. So, Krishna's Vibhuti is this last category where equal emphasis is on both the words in the samas, when they are united, which is called dvandva. Then the fourth manifestation that is presented before us is the Kal. Akshaya Kal, everlasting time. See, you must appreciate that time is being constantly underscored. When we just recollected the verses, the 30th verse of this chapter mentioned that, Krishna's vibhuti is time amongst all reckoners or systems of calculation. Time is everlasting and indestructible. It stretches infinitely into the past and infinitely into the future. It existed in the past, it exists now, and will exist in the future. So it is one vast continuum without an end and a beginning. Okay, we, with our mental faculties, perceive it differently in the past, present, and future. And even in the form of measurements as, minutes, hours, days, weeks, centuries, etc. But it is everlasting. There is no beginning and no end. So Krishna identifies with the indestructible, everlasting principle of time. This is the principle of time, of calculation, which was earlier also specified as a method of calculation. Right? Then he talks about, I am the supporter facing all directions. Brahman supports the world just as our mind supports a dream. So, whatever you are dreaming, you dream of an aeroplane, you dream of another person, you dream of a city, you dream of yourself, all these things, the city, the aeroplane, the other person, and you yourself are actually manifestation of your mind. Similarly, the Brahman is the substratum of all things, and therefore can be assumed as facing all directions and supporting the universe's pluralistic phenomena. In short, when we read this verse, again, on note of caution, everything is in the relative realm. All these vibhutis that Krishna is presenting to us are in the relative realm, so amongst the Vedas or amongst the elephants. I mean, so it's in that category he's picking out the best. So Krishna is the very vitality, the noblest, the greatest factor in everything in the universe. And all these actually exist in Krishna. Moving on to verse number 25. Let's chant. I'll chant. Mrityu sarva haraschaham udbhavasya bhavishyatam kirti shrirvakasya narinam smritir medha dhriti kshama. And I am the all-devouring death and birth of future beings. Of the feminine, Kirti, Shri, Vak, Smriti, Medha, Dhriti, and Kshama. This is what the verse translates to. Let's take this up word by word. Mrityu, we all know, is death. Sarvahara. Sarv is all. Har is, the root is, all devouring. Harna, Haran, Sita, Haran, so you take away. So removing or taking away. So Sarvhar becomes all devouring. Cha and Aham, I. Udbhava is birth. Cha and Bhavishyatam. So Bhavishya is future. Bhavishyatam becomes of future. And here we are referring to beings, of future beings. Kriti is a proper noun, which also means fame. Kirti, which is a proper noun, which also means fame. Shri is a proper noun, which also means prosperity. Vak is a proper noun, which also means speech. Cha and Narinam. So Nari is feminine, female. Narinam becomes of the feminine. Smriti is a proper noun which means memory. Medha is a proper noun which means intelligence. Dhriti is a proper noun which means firmness. And Kshama is a proper noun which means forgiveness. So we'll take up these proper nouns while we're discussing. But as a translation, what it becomes is that, and I am the all-devouring death, and the birth of future beings. Of the feminine, I am Kirti or fame, Shri, prosperity, Vak, speech, Smriti, memory, Medha, intelligence, Dhriti, firmness, and Kshama, forgiveness. So let's chant it together. Mrityu sarvaharaschaham Udbhavascha bhavishyatam Kirti shrirvakascha narinam Smritir medha dhriti kshama. So let's take the first line is, I am the all-devouring death and the birth of future beings, right? Udbhava is the birth, so birth of future beings. So now see, death is all destructive destruction. It levels everything. Also, everything in the world is in a state of change. It's constantly changing. What does change mean? Change means the death of the previous state or condition and the start of the new state or condition. Also, please appreciate that when one is saying that I am the all-devouring death, what Krishna is meaning that I am that destructive power and not that I am killing. It's not that. He's saying that I am that destructive power. So, or Brahman is that all-devouring force of destruction. This destruction that Krishna is talking about is actually constructive destruction, because the one state which is destroyed leads to the other state which is created, origin of the future, so that's why it has to be taken together. So the best examples that you see around you is that the flower dies and the fruit is born. The fruit dies and the seeds are, gives way, the fruit gives way to seeds. When you plant the seeds, the seed decays and the sapling is born. So one is destroyed and the next appears. Similarly, stone is destroyed to make statues. Cotton is destroyed or harvested from the fields. Clothes are made. So on and so forth. You look around you and you'll see the change happening in all sphere of, in all the activities that we see around us. So death is the annihilation of the past and creation of the future. And that is what is being referred to by Krishna here. And Krishna's Vibhuti is this constructive destruction. That was the first line and the first metaphor that we used here. The second metaphor is referring to, he's saying, I am Kirti, Shri, Vak, Smriti, Medha, Dhriti, and Kshama of feminine. Now, these are proper nouns, and Kirti, Smriti, Medha, Dhriti, and Kshama are daughters of Prasuti and Prajapati. Earlier we had, when we were doing the manifestations, the salient manifestations, we had also identified certain great sages. And we had said that they were also Prajapatis who were selected by Lord Brahma, the god of creation, for, creation of the mankind. So one of them was Prajapati with the name, with that name. So Kriti, Smriti, Medha, Dhriti, and Kshama are daughters of Prasuti and Prajapati. Shri is the daughter of the great sage Bhrigu and Khyati. Now, Bhrigu in the 25th verse of this chapter was one of the salient manifestations amongst the sages. Okay. And Vak is Lord Brahma's daughter. Brahma is the Lord of creation. So all these names are proper nouns, and they are identified with 7 outstanding women deities, each of which presides over a virtue. And the name of the deity brings out that virtue. So Kirti, I'm repeating, Kirti is fame, Shri refers to prosperity, Vak is to speech, Smriti is memory, Medha is sharp intelligence, Dhriti is firmness or consistency in whatever we do, and Kshama is forgiveness. So Krishna is identifying himself with these 7 glorious qualities of the mind. Moving on to the last verse for the day, which is verse number 35. Brihat sam tatha samanamaha Gayatri chand samaham Masana margashirshoham Ritunam kusumakaraha. So we have overshot the time, but I'm just continuing. This verse we'll do quick, faster. So the verse translates to also Brihat Sam of Sam hymns. I'm Gayatri of meters. Of months, I'm Margshish. Of seasons, Kusumakar, or when the flowers bloom. Okay. So this is what the verse is translating to. Now let's take this up word by word. Brahat Sam is a proper noun. Tatha also. Samanam, of hymns of the Samaved. Gayatri is a proper noun. Chandasam, of meters. Chand, is the metric composition that we have of meters. Aham, I. Masanam, amongst the months. Margshish is a proper noun, is the name of a month. Aham, I. Ritunam, of ritus. Kusumakara, the flowery season, which is kusum means flower. So the flowery season or the spring. So this is what the verse means, that also Brihat Sam of Sam hymns, I am Gayatri of meters, of months I'm Margshish, of seasons Kusumakar. Let's chant it together. Brahat Sam tatha Sam namaha Gayatri chand samaham Masana margashirshoham Ritunam kusumakara. So 4 metaphors. Brihat Sam of Sam hymns. Now, the 22nd verse of this chapter, Krishna had mentioned his Vibhuti amongst the Vedas as the Samaved, because Samved was the Ved of melodies and chants, and most of the Samaved has been drawn out of the Rig Veda. And the rhythm and tune of these melodies are used in the chanting of all the scriptures. And we had also at that point of time discussed all this, but I'm just revising that Samved sets important foundations for Indian music. Now, within the Samved, there is a hymn which is called the Brihat Sam. Brihat Sam hymn is extremely melodious and is considered the best hymn. It is sung for the god, praising him under Lord Indra's name. So amongst the lyrical hymns, Krishna is identifying himself with Brihat Sam. The second metaphor is Gayatri of meters. Now, Gayatri appears, the Gayatri mantra actually appears in the Rig Veda. And all of us are aware that it is revered as the oldest and the most important of all metric compositions of the Vedas. The greatness of the Gayatri mantra lies in its intonational quality, sound, as well as the philosophical meaning. And I don't know, some of you may be aware that the Gayatri mantra is actually used at this time of dawn and dusk, the Sandhya times that we pray, sit down to pray when it's dawn and dusk, when the amount of infrared and the ultraviolet portions of the lights, sunlight is changing. So that is when we do Sandhya. And it is offered as a prayer to the sun god. And the prayer signifies the invocation of the Atman, or the inner self within us. Then we talk of Margshish among the months. So now Krishna moves on to the weathers and seasons. Margshish is the month of late December and early January. It is a cold month, which is very good for someone living in our kind of hot tropical climate. Also, it is considered one of the most auspicious months of the year, and prayers and rituals are very common during this month. It culminates in the festival of Makar Sankranti, which is known by different names in different states across India. So each across India, we're celebrating in some form or another. So this is the Margshish month for us. Kusumakar, the flowery season. Kusum, as I said, means flower. And so this is the flowery season, or the season of the spring, when the nature, is a riot of colors, and there blooms everywhere, and the entire plant kingdom seems to be celebrating. And the pleasant spring season, when it's neither too hot or not too cold, adds to the cheer of all living beings, all creatures, etc., also apart from the plant kingdom. So Krishna is identifying with Margshish amongst the months and Kusumakar amongst the seasons. So with that, we will conclude today's session. And just give me a moment.